Whoever is listening, guys, welcome back. It has been way too long for an episode of the Man with the Plan podcast. Guys, as always, thank you for your support and thank you for all of just the messages and reaching out and being like, hey, what's going on? But been busy with work, school. It's just been juggling all that before this final stretch. And I think there's no better way to get back into the swing of things than having someone on with Richard Yeargin's story. And today we have on former Clemson football player, former Boston College football player, now serving as an athletic leadership lecturer at Clemson University. He's the author of the book, The Man is Greater Than the Brand, and he's a two-time national champion. What is there more to say about this? Richard, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for taking the time out of your day.
Man, Mr. Mann, thank you for having me on your show, man. It's an honor and a privilege, like I told you before we began, and I'm just thankful to be in your space. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So we're just gonna get right into it. With all my guests, especially former players, I just love hearing how you got into the sport. Was it maybe like a parent? Was it your brother, sister? Was it anybody that was like, "Hey, you should try this football thing"? And then once they saw the product on the field, going, "Hey, you might want to stick with this." So through that eventual start, how did your journey begin?
Oh my gosh. So I think I started playing football before I started actually playing football. You start as a kid, 3 and 4 years old, you get that pro jersey for Christmas, and you start running around imagining yourself being for me at the time, a Miami Hurricane. I hate to say that out loud. And a Miami Dolphin because I'm from Fort Lauderdale. Those are the teams that are obviously closest in distance. So you just root for your home team. So I grew up always thinking football, basketball, football, basketball, but actually began playing football on a competitive level, Pee Wee football about 5 or 6. That's really young. We start pretty young in South Florida. So just breeding that love for the game, growing up in the neighborhood, playing football day and night in the street. It's just nonstop, right? Football, football. So, I mean, it becomes a part of your everyday life, right? So I got to go to school and come home so I can get, opportunity to go out and play some football. So it really was never like something that was forced or anything that was not natural. It was just always there, right? Like as an outlet. And so for me, it was just a natural thing of going from playing optimist to playing high school. And then obviously having my wildest dream fulfilled in playing college. But actually ended up playing college at Clemson University, and as you mentioned, at Boston College. So, man, I mean, football is obviously taking me a lot of places.
Absolutely. It's done it can do so many things, and I think as you and I have seen, college football has evolved and it's been able to do much more than me growing up ever thought it would be. So walk us through your high school football recruitment and just the process of why Clemson. And then after that, we just talk about what's different because I think recruiting 2015, 2014, 2013 is vastly different a decade later in 2023. You have NIL now, you have so much encompassing football, the transfer portal. It's fascinating to talk to players who aren't specifically within that era, but have a perspective that's unique to the sport.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I would say my rise to fame as a recruit was not easy. It came actually on the flip side of being embarrassed by two individuals and going viral. One was Duke Johnson's highlight tape when he
Oh
was a
man.
senior and I was a freshman. And then again as a sophomore at a camp versus Amari Cooper, where I was covering him one on one as a safety. So, all of that to say, I was out of position in the beginning. I was not
Wow.
a highly ranked guy always my whole life, right? Like I had to go through a process my ninth and 10th grade year to evolve into a highly ranked recruit. And so for me, transfer high schools in order to make that happen and make a switch. And so I got to Chaminade Madonna High School as a sophomore, and my coach said to me, he said, "Look, you're an outside linebacker. With your speed, with your size, these things, like this is going to happen." He kind of started already writing my future. And so I'm very thankful for Coach Tim Terrell because he opened many doors for me when I didn't see them, right? When I couldn't see my talents and my gifts that I had and how they were going to work to play at the next level, he showed me and put me in that right position. So I did what I had to do as a junior. I came in, with expectations of, being all county, being all state, met all those requirements, fulfilled all those dreams. Had a wonderful breakout junior year, led me into my senior year, where I became an Army All American. I switched schools again because my head coach ended up transitioning and leaving and going somewhere else. I ended up playing and ending my high school career at University School in South Florida, which is a highly competitive private school as well, and played for Coach Roger Harriet. And things just took off from there. And so every school, as you can imagine, in the country was recruiting me, and it came down to Clemson, University of Texas, Notre Dame, and University of Florida. I was committed to University of Florida silently, verbally throughout the summer. Then I ended up committing to Notre Dame openly and verbally committing there. And so up until about 2 or 3 weeks before signing day, I decided I was going to flip my intentions and go and sign with Clemson. And the reason being was my official visit that I took during the military game and the previous visit that I had come up to Clemson and visited only once my sophomore year when I first was approached by Clemson with an offer before I even became who I was going to become. Coach Brent Venables, had offered me as a sophomore when he first took the job here at Clemson. So I always had that love, that loyalty, that respect, for Clemson being one of those schools who saw the potential in me early before other schools did. And sometimes in your recruitment process, right, you have so many voices, you have so many people telling you, look at this school, look at that school, do this because of this, do this because of that. And it's like, you can't ever really decipher what your own voice is in your recruiting process because you've got so many factors that are trying to weigh in on your one big decision for your life, right? And so I would say it was a very tough decision for me to redirect my path back towards committing to Clemson because I had had so many other schools pursuing me. I had family members, coaches, maybe with their hands in my process a little too much. And so I had to make some decisions based on my morals, right? I had to go
Mhm.
back to where's my faith going to take me, right? So not chasing money, right? At the time, obviously that was illegal, but obviously there were schools that were still willing. Won't drop any names, but at the end of the day, right, I knew Clemson was trying to do it right, 100% across the boards. And the other thing that I didn't realize was we were on the verge of something special, right? And I didn't even realize, the class that I came in with, right? So just the people and just like the environment itself was something that was different. And so when I made that full-fledged decision, it was bigger than just football. It was everything. It was family, it was education, it was culture, all of those things that, are what set Clemson apart for me, right? In my process and knowing that I picked the school for a lifetime, right, and not just a short time, right. So that was the difference maker, man. That really drove me to wanting to come to Clemson was I knew I'd be back on this other side at one point or another in my life, and I would be thankful for the journey.
Yeah, you talk about finding your own voice. And I think in today's age of college football, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this and how it's changed. Do you think it's harder for recruits to be able to find that voice specifically? Because that saying that money talks and that NIL drives a lot of what college football is like today. We have examples like Quinn Ewers from Texas foregoing his senior year of high school, picks up $1 million check at Ohio State, and now is back at Texas. And it's not like a bad thing because this is life changing money they're going after, but you think it's harder for these recruits to be able to really express that voice and really express who they are as players and individuals when there is this big pot on the table ready for them to take if they decide to go to one university or the other. What have been your thoughts on the early guinea pig years of the NIL and how it's impacted high school recruiting?
I mean, it's definitely added a ton of gray area where it was once black and white, which was like, hey, this is right and this is wrong, right? It's like, what is right and what is wrong now, right? Where do you set the line for integrity in terms of either I'm trying to help this young man or I'm trying to, tear him down, right? And there's a lot of people that don't realize, each young man has his own motives, right? Each young man has his own set of expectations that he's placed on himself, that his family's placed on him. And then when you're looking at which university you want to attend, that university comes with its own set of expectations and standards as well. And so I think when you involve money, that makes it even more intense, right? When you make a decision, whether it works out or it doesn't work out, right? That school is going to continue to move forward, right? And they're going to continue to recruit the next guy. So I think at this point in time, it's a bidding war, right? For who can put up the most money and who can provide the best opportunity and experience up front. And it's like, how can you promise a kid all these things are going to happen when if he gets there, none of what he said he was going to do works out, and now one of you is left holding the bag, right? So like you don't even know what he's going to be yet, and you're promising him all these things, and he doesn't even know what he's going to be yet, and you're giving him all these things. So it's kind of like there's a lot of um, things at stake here, right? And so when you're talking about someone's future, I think the best thing that you could do is sit them down and educate them, right, on things outside of money, right? Things that you can give them that might not necessarily bring you the money that you want right away, but in the long term, right? Like
Mhm.
you're gonna get so much for your experience in return that you're not gonna be able to repay it, right? It's gonna be that big, it's gonna be that awesome, it's gonna be that great. And I think again, going back to my point in my recruitment process, I did not see that until the very end of it, right? That there's a lot of people out there who promise you things, who say things, but everybody isn't always, having your best interest at heart. And I think that's kind of the hard part is when you're young and you're going through that process, your heart and your mind are all over the place, like all over the place. Like if someone gave you something that's shiny and said, hey, you should commit to it, right? Whether that's an endorsement deal, that's a brand deal, it's like that sounds great, but does it align with my character? And I think a lot of people like may miss that question because it's like I could take this right now, but what if long term, like that brand that you're representing or whatever doesn't align with your values, and then it goes against who you are, and then it does something to you, or just so many different things that I think you have to question, especially when you're young and you have not matured yet and you have not had the experiences of life to decide, whether this is something that you wanted to commit to long term or short term. And I think that's where that education piece, having support, having the right infrastructure as far as family dynamics, coaching, administrators at school, all that stuff is just so important on all aspects, just to make sure that the student athlete is not put at risk, right, for their long term success in their future.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's a lot of layers to this, and I think it's going to continue to grow and it's going to continue to evolve in different ways just because the nature of NIL is, I don't think it's not sustainable to just stay at what it is right now. It's going to continue to grow. But you mentioned something earlier that I believe is super fascinating to Clemson fans now,
Hmm.
students, fans, is that when you arrived at Clemson, you probably couldn't have picked a better time because you have
Right.
this stream of players, including yourself, getting ready to change Clemson into what the standard is about today, which is the playoffs or bust. Multiple 10-win season. It's either 10 or 11 or 12. It's super high streak, ACC champions. Do you recall a
Hmm.
moment in your career or at Clemson, where you're with the team, and there's a moment where you're thinking, this is before this can be either in a game or in a practice or in a film session where you look at everybody and you go, this team could be pretty good. This team could go to a national championship. Not only can go to one, but actually win it because you have the 2015 national championship, 2016 or the 15 appearance, the 2016 national championship win in Tampa, and that's when everything changed. When, in your eyes, did you think, oh yeah, we could do this?
I knew right away my freshman summer after being here for a year, transitioning into being a sophomore. So I'd redshirted that year, and now I was going to be a redshirt freshman. Our team was just different, right? Like as we transitioned, as Deshaun took full ownership over the offense, and as we had the pieces of the puzzle all starting to come together, the leadership on the team, everything just went to another level. I remember it being as clear as day. It was just like the competition and practice, just how serious like weightlifting and everything began to become. And it was just like it wasn't that it wasn't like that before, but that 2015 season was like that was an eye opener for a lot of people. because a lot of the games that typically we might have maybe not won in the end, or might have been a struggle for us, really wasn't a struggle, right? Until we got to NC State. And then when we powered through NC State and we won that game, it was like, okay, now we're at the home stretch, right? And so I think when we got to Oklahoma, that was that statement game, right? Like that was
Yeah.
that Clemson's here to do some things for some years type of win, right? And so it was just, I mean, for me, man, as a young player, obviously growing in who I was becoming, um, I just remember, right, like, man, like this is cool, man. I couldn't have never imagined picking a better school, right? Like at a better time, like you said, man. So I remember how everything just shifted and changed, man. That was different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was 14 and I was in eighth grade, and I remember that weekend that y'all were in Phoenix for it was the media thing, and my dad had taken off of work for the weekend, and he and my mom were in their room watching every second of just wanting to hear whatever was being said. As a kid, I'm like, yeah, Clemson's in the national championship. This is awesome, but I don't think I understood the gravity of the moment of this hasn't happened in a long time, and someone like my parents who have grown up with Clemson fans, my dad telling me, "Hey, Grayson, when they won 7 games, we were like, this is a miracle." So that for you and when you guys are in that stadium, you're getting ready to play Alabama, and the
Mhm.
result didn't end like you guys wanted, but it felt like y'all still made a statement saying, "Hey, we weren't pushed over, and we were maybe a play or two away from being back-to-back national champions, as we found out in Tampa." So for you, did you understand the gravity of the moment at that time, just for like the fans and the culture and just how things were changing, like you said, or was it something that you understood the moment, you were fully prepared for that?
I believe it was a little bit of both, right? My defensive line coach, Coach Mary Hobby, he always had this saying of, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And as defensive ends, we set the tone for, pretty much how things are gonna move going forward, right? So that game that you mentioned, that Alabama game, we took that to heart because, we had two older guys that were playing their heart out, right? Shaq Lawson and Kevin Dodd, we knew they were about to go to the NFL. And it was like, okay, now as young players, we got to step up and, make up for that production that those guys, brought and the things that they were able to do. And, we're young guys, but now we're guys that have to be veterans, have to be seasoned, right? And we gotta step up. Like we just have to. And so I think, for us in that moment, we understood what we needed to do because we've seen it done before us, right? And so that off season, the amount of work that it took, right, to put the team back in the right mind space of like, you know, we might have lost that one, but we're gonna win in the end mentality, I think is what brought us to the 2016 season of leaving no prisoners and no doubt for sure, right? Like we started the journey in 2015, but I think we put the nail in the coffin in 2016. And that would not have happened had we not lost that game, right? So we needed to lose that game in order to realize how critical the moment was to set us up for 2016, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you find it that in that space, and you talk about prepping for 2016, when you climb all the way to the top of the mountain and you understand what it takes to get there, did you find that it was harder to in the regular season games like that you didn't maybe that wasn't you were like, oh, this isn't important, it's SC State or it's Troy, but did you find yourself going, man, like there's a tech like you're playing an extended season, playing longer than
Mhm.
everybody else, and you start to feel that maybe the weight of it, I guess, the expectation. Was it harder in 2016 or was it, oh, we know how to do this? This is easy type? Not maybe easy in that sense, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I think 2016 was a lot of adjusting going on, right? Because when we first took over the reins, as young players playing the position of defensive end, nonstop, continuously, game after game, I think it was good that we had opponents like Troy and South Carolina State in the beginning of our careers as we took over because that gave us the confidence that we needed going into some of those other games later into the season. So I would say starting with Auburn, that was a tough one. And then after that, playing South Carolina State, getting our feet wet for real, and then moving on and playing other opponents like Troy, which was a tough game.
Mhm.
That really taught us a lot, right? Like, don't take teams lightly, right? Like, don't take them for granted. And so that molded us and shaped us and prepared us for those harder games like Louisville. like NC State again, right? Like those real nail biters. Like we needed all those games on that schedule to prepare us for the thicker things on the back end of that schedule that we had playing, the Ohio States, playing Alabama again, and being able to really, show them what's up. So I think all of that stuff really, really mattered. All of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get to Tampa. I had a feeling, and you start to pick up on certain things as you get older, especially when you continue to watch the game year after year. It felt like, man, if we could get Alabama again, just because it wouldn't probably be this. You can win the national championship playing anybody else, but if you can redeem a loss from last year that was this close, how did it feel to be able to and just walk through those final moments, Watson to Renfro? From your perspective, I can't imagine the feeling. I was with my family there. It was people were crying. It was unbelievable. So from your perspective, what was that like? Those final moments in Tampa where you had reached the top of the mountain and it felt like, wow, like this is what it feels like.
So to be honest with you, you know, they say a lot of people don't know Michael Jordan personally, but when you see his name appear, you think of the symbol, right? So that night, right, like I think I have to I have to pay homage to Deshaun. Just so much respect for him as a leader and how he walked up to the defense and he's like, y'all sit back down and left too much time on the clock. And to see how he went out there and just executed him and Hunter, I mean, that was practice, right? Like they do that in practice. That wasn't like something that just happened on game day magically. Like that was, you see it every day, but then to see it happen when it matters most and for it to come to fruition, it just lets you know that it was meant to be. Like it was destined, it was already written. And so I think a lot of people have to realize that visualization is how you manifest something into happening. And so we'd already visualized having that success. We had already been through losing the year before. Again, we had already been through the disappointing loss during the season that set us up for the win when we played Alabama in that moment. So
Mm-hmm.
I think everything leading up to that very moment in time, it was like a huge release. It was like a huge breakthrough because obviously we hadn't won a national championship since 1981. So I mean, it was a great time, one of the best times of my life.
Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from a just start out freshman year in high school and being able to experience that at such a young age. I mean, it's an unbelievable experience, but I can't imagine for the guys that actually went put in the hours in the field, those early mornings in the weight room, all of that. It's got to be very rewarding feeling, I'm sure.
Yes, sir.
So they're part of your story, and whatever details you feel like sharing, like you
Yeah,
feel like sharing. I'm going to post the ESPN article when we this episode goes live. Walk us through
absolutely.
this part of your journey and just whatever you feel like sharing details wise. I think it's an inspirational return and just makes it's part
Yeah,
of you as hey, this experience nearly ended your life as what the article states, but you're able to come out on the better side of it and really tell that story. So whatever details you're comfortable sharing, walk the audience through just what that was like and how you came out better for it.
absolutely. So as we talked about the mountaintop moment that I had, well, let's talk about the valley that came right after the mountaintop for me, right? And that valley was breaking my neck in a severe car wreck on June 3rd, 2017, which would be approximately 4.5, 5 months after that moment that we just
Oh,
discussed, right? So crazy turn of events, right? And so that being the case, now I'm not just without football, but I'm without the ability to walk. I'm without the ability to do a lot of things for a short period of time. So for that first week after breaking my neck in a severe car wreck on that particular date, what it did was it took me out of alignment with what I thought was for me, which was for me to ultimately go to the NFL, graduate with my degree in 3.5 years that fall of 2017. All of my plans, right? Nope. I had to submit to something way bigger, way higher than me, right? And that calling of being, you know, someone that represents more than just football, it comes with a heavy price. So I
mm-hmm.
literally broke my neck, right, to show that regardless of not having football in my life, I'm still going to have to press forward. And that was not easy, right? To be crushed by 2,000 pounds on your neck and to
Jeez.
survive that accident only because you have been built by Clemson, right? So had I not been a Clemson defensive end with the stature, with the type of, muscular build, all that, I would not have survived that car wreck by myself, right? So I
Unbelievable.
had God on my side. I had God on my side, and I had man on my side because had I not been the size man that I was, I wouldn't have made it. So the reality is you're just thankful, right, for life itself after a moment like that, of a lot of grief, a lot of pain, a lot of questioning why me, but then again, why not me, right? So he wouldn't have brought me to that moment if he wasn't going to bring me through it. So it took me 2 years, man, constant recovery, in and out of mental rehab as well as physical, right? Going through multiple addictions, going through setbacks and things in my life because of that accident, having to rewire, retailor, and rekindle a lot of different things in my life as far as relationships with folks that, I didn't know I would need who I would need until you need them.
Hmm.
And so, in my life, man, I would say throughout that 2 year time period, I coached, as a GA with Clemson, got my master's degree in athletic leadership. I stayed focused on the things that I could control. So even though my condition and my circumstances weren't what I wanted, I knew that wasn't going to be my conclusion. And so for me, that journey, man, was very humbling because it took me to my knees, literally, a lot, right? Asking God to make a way. And eventually he did, right? He heard me and an unanswered prayer came. And I was able to play again at Boston College after that 2 year journey. And, it's something that I don't take lightly because gratitude should be applied to all situations, but this is an easy one to apply gratitude to when you didn't think it was possible or it was going to happen, and it happens because you've been preparing before the moment even comes, and you didn't realize you were, even though you were going through ups and downs, trials and tribulations. The conclusion was I had that second opportunity to play at Boston College. I didn't look back. Became the ACC Brian Piccolo Comeback Player Award winner. Started as a guy who hadn't played in 2 years, ended up getting started on my other master's degree in healthcare administration, had a wonderful experience, left there, in really good standings and, was able to go out into the world and now become a productive citizen. So, it to me, everything that I went through in that time period and beyond shaped me and molded me into who I am today.
It's I'm at like a loss. Like it's unbelievable to just kind of hear that perspective and just how you think there's an age old saying is if you tell God your plan, he's gonna laugh in your face and something different will take shape. And I think for you, it's you mentioned that if it wasn't for Clemson and you wouldn't be where you are today, how did in that 2 year span, how did someone guys like Dabo, Venables, teammates, how did they play a pivotal role in just being a figure, being there for you in that situation? What does that say about Clemson? Just in the simplest of words, I guess.
Man, honestly, you put Clemson in the category of elite in each category, right? Academically, athletically, socially, it's elite, elite, elite. And you wonder what that elitism does to people. And man, my teammates served me. They did. You know, I had multiple guys, whether in my unit or outside of my unit, my college roommate, Travion Thompson, Christopher Register, Kendall Joseph, Myla Richard, so many guys that specifically were in my class, Cleveland Farrell, Austin Bryant, all those guys, even younger guys, man, just so much just surrounding you, right? Like you can't fall when you've got your brothers holding you up. And as you mentioned, having Coach Sweeney, you know, in my life at that time, man, I mean, people hear him speak and they see what he does, but they don't know the full impact because maybe they didn't have close contact with him. But I'm telling you, like if it wasn't for all of the resources and all of the things that he poured into us beyond just football, right? Like Jeff Davises of the world, right? that created Paul Journey for the players, for us to have exposure to things that most college football players don't even think they could have exposure to, right? Coach Venables, very tough coach, doesn't take no for an answer. Staying on
Yeah.
you, saying, "Man, you can come back. You can come back. Like you could do this, right?" Like having coaches motivate you, right? I mean, it's just the whole program, the entire Clemson Nation. Like I could go on and name so many
Mhm.
names, but just you brought up a few, and so just to speak to that, man, it's just man, like I don't know where I would be if I didn't have all of those people in my life, those relationships, those conversations. When you're real low and you need somebody, man, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. It's an unbelievable just statement to what the culture has really festered and evolved into. Another thing for that article and the last one before we dive into a couple rapid little fun questions to boost up the thing here. But so it says that Chase Bryce was someone that he was made it a point to sought you out the second national championship, the one in San Francisco, was over. He ended up
mm-hmm.
him with Chase Bryce. He's had a great career at App State, just wrapped that up, had a pivotal moment against Syracuse that year with you as a GA. So walk through what y'all's relationship was like. That's something when I read it, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. So walk us through what that was like with him because I believe he was a freshman at the time. If that's not the case, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, you talk about C Breezy, and I mean, you have to think about like the fact that he served like nobody else has ever served as a backup quarterback at Clemson University, right? So like even though he was a freshman, he was so ahead of his time, like just his level of maturity, right? Like just as a young man. And so, being a coach, you gravitate towards those kind of guys, right? Like they have that right attitude, that mentality it's infectious, right? Like it rubs off on other people. And man, his smile, just his charisma, just him as a young player, just absorbing knowledge. Um, man, it was like him and I, we would go play golf sometimes, right? Or, we would just do different activities, just really to know one another, right? And how does that come about? It's just because good people link up with good people. And it doesn't matter what position you play, what background you come from, like we're all teammates, we're all brothers. And so that relationship meant a lot to me. And you have to protect those type of relationships. And he definitely protected it by letting me know in that moment, seeking me out, right? To say, hey, this isn't about just them or, whatever winning the national championship. It's about us. Like, this is, you are a part of this. Like, no matter what, I'm just like, thank you. Like, I mean, like, thank you. Like, even though like I was not able to physically take part, like thank you for seeking me out and letting me know that I was a part, like being mindful and seeing me in that moment. Like I appreciated that, and that's just something that always stuck with me.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome to hear. Another thing, we're gonna finish up the. Thank you again for your time. We're gonna finish this up with some rapid fire, little fun questions. You mentioned moments against players like Duke Johnson and Amari Cooper, and you being on the bad side of that. Was there ever a moment
Right.
against a player where you got the jump on maybe someone who's playing in the NFL now, and you're like, oh man, I can't believe that happened. Like you, any experiences like that?
Absolutely. Joe Mixon, 2015. He tried to blindside me on a screenplay, and let's just say he caught the worst end of that, and it didn't end up well for him. And it's interesting. He had gotten me back in high school, and so that was actually payback. Then he got me at the U.S. Nike opening.
Oh,
He caught a ball over me. He felt pretty good about himself. He stood over me, and I was like, one day, one
one
day
day.
one day I'm gonna make you pay for that. And that day, that day was on one of the biggest stages in college football, and I don't regret it at all. Obviously,
Hey, it's
definitely he earned that. He earned that.
Clemson's first playoff game. You had to get him back. You had to make sure you got your moment. That's awesome. That's
Absolutely,
unbelievable. And is
absolutely.
that this isn't? It can be the same moment, but was there another moment at Clemson that's unforgettable? It can be the Watson Renfro thing. It can be the national championships.
Yeah,
Is there a moment in
yeah,
Clemson that's like maybe it was a funny story in the locker room or in the film room, just a funny
yeah.
moment that stands out?
You know, our team had a lot of characters. I'll tell you that much. And I guess probably one of the funniest things that I've ever experienced at Clemson was when you first get here. You don't realize how big respect is, especially in the locker room, especially with coaches and everything. And I remember being a young player, and I believe we were about maybe 1 minute late to like our first Friday workout
Oh
with Coach
no.
Batson. And
Oh no.
you're a high school, right? So you're transitioning. So your workouts are maybe not as intense as like obviously the older guys and guys that have been there. So you kind of take for granted like time, right? Like time is everything in college. And so it's like, oh, we were 1 minute late. Like he'll understand. We could just tell him like, hey, we coach, but we legitimately were. We were wrapped up with like some freshman orientation stuff. And like he was like, I don't care. Like workout started 60 seconds ago. Like, should have been here. It's like,
Oh no.
and I'll never forget, like, that's when I realized the essence of time is like, it don't matter if it's 1 minute, it don't matter if it's 30 seconds, right? Like, you got to be on time. And so I never messed around with time after that instance because that punishment and that pain of regret, would have been keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result and wouldn't end up playing out well for you. So I would say, man, that was honestly one of the funniest moments is like seeing him snap and like going to his whole Coach Batson mode over 1 minute, right? And it's
Oh
just to me, it's like it's just 1 minute, 60 seconds, right? As a young player, but 60 seconds can change an entire game, as we know, right? 6 seconds can change an entire game. So just the irony between time, right, and learning what time is, and then realizing, like, man, I have to value it, I have to treasure it, right? Because
yeah.
you never know when it could be gone.
Yeah, that's Coach
Yeah,
Patson strikes me as one that you don't want to really mess around with.
no, absolutely not, absolutely not,
So
absolutely not.
to wrap up this, and Rich, thanks once again for coming. This has been unbelievable. Clemson has not been to the playoffs the last 2 years. How does this team led by Klubnik? They have Garrett Riley coming in. There's a lot of young talent that's made some headlines over this past weekend at the spring game. How does the 2023 Clemson Tigers? How do they get back to the playoffs and that get back to the mountaintop as we've talked about in this podcast?
I think it comes down to realizing it's in your DNA, and it's kind of like when Simba came back to reclaim his throne right after he had been
Mm-hmm.
gone for quite some time in the most recent Lion King. And he looked into the reflection and he saw his father speaking to him. So I think that this new generation that's coming through in this class, right? Like they know it's there. It's in the background. Like the championships and stuff is kind of like the background noise. And they know like they're close, right? Like they have the ability, but it's putting it all together. And I think a lot of those pieces come from within. And it's not just so much of what you see on the field. I think it's just believing in themselves off the field as well and continuing to grow this summer, get some more cohesion. And then coming to fall camp, I mean, you just never know, right? Like any given Saturday, you've got to bring it. So I think, this team has that mentality of they know that the championships are there within reach and that they have the DNA within them. It's just a matter of getting out there and doing it. And it's just a process, right? So now they're in the real transformation phase, right? Like summertime is where guys transform. So I will say, and I will venture out to even predict
Ooh,
that by this time, right? So by this time next year, we're going to see a completely different Clemson. And I can honestly say that we're going to look in that reflection pond. We're going to see, and they're going to hear from guys such as myself and others who have played, and it's going to speak into them somehow, some way, and they're going to do really well. They're going to do well.
there you go. And they're gonna look at that pond, hopefully see a little trophy. And I believe it's Houston this year. So we'll see if that
Yep.
comes to fruition. So Richard,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you for coming on to episode 117, the Name of the Plan podcast. Guys, I know that I haven't been here in a month and a half, but if we can get to 18,000 listeners across all platforms of this podcast, that would be fantastic. What a better way to subscribe to get more interviews like this, conversations with athletes like Richard, guys like Bo Collins, Bear Carter, Marcus Tate, Ricky Sapp, Darian Rencher. We got a whole list of them, guys, and much, much more to come. I'm excited to get back to weekly episodes. weekly interviews. It's all coming. School's almost over, guys. I'll be here. So, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Man with a Plan podcast with Richard Yeargin. Thank you so much. Have a great day and take care.